I've had a few businesses. One was with the family, which grew into quite a large business. And as part of that, started another 2 businesses that tied in with that was the family farm. And then I've had a couple of little ventures of my own from ideas that I've had. Probably 2 I'd focus on, which would be good examples. The first one is a value-added business from our farming enterprise. So we were growing a lot of fruit, and when grading that fruit to put it onto the market, you always have strawberries that they had a mark on them or something. They're still edible, but they weren't good for marketing. So we always wanted to make another product out of that. So that was one venture that I started, and that was making gourmet preserves from what we call the out of spec fruit. And I had 18 lines of gourmet preserves with fresh basil pesto, strawberries in syrup, mango sauce, and that was quite successful very early because it was an addition to our existing business. The other, I suppose it's a good example, is just an idea that I had only about 5 years ago. On my own, I was doing Airbnb, and I imported products for the shampoos and soaps that you leave for your guests. And that actually led to 2 business ventures. And I don't have those anymore. So there's interesting ways of what happened with that. From finding a commercial kitchen to do the preserving in, to finding the equipment, the big blenders and commercial kitchen equipment, to putting some staff on. There was extra staff, getting permits, getting trademarks, branding. All of those things were all a new venture. It was just that we had the product, we had the basil and the strawberries and the mangoes to go into it. It was because we had a lot of waste, and we knew that there was something that we could turn that waste into profit rather than we were feeding it to cattle at the time. So rather than just have it as waste, we had always wanted to turn it into what they call a value add. So it was first of all deciding what we could do with the product. There's some products that, we tried caramelized onions in a jar because we grew a lot of onions at the time, but that really it didn't work. So we went through a lot of trials of different products. Again, it was about what we could make commercially that didn't have too much cost input. So the caramelized onion took a lot of onions and a lot of sugar. So it was a very high, expensive product to produce. So that didn't work really. The strawberries, and we had figs, they were bulkier fruit, so they turned out to be viable. And it was about doing the maths on how much went in and how much we could make on them. Then we had to have a name for it, and that was quite a process, and it was just a serendipitous phrase that a friend used one time in a letter to me when I'd sent them some product, and they said that their daughter was the professor of all things delicious. And we found that that was a really good name. So it turned out to be Suzette's All Things Delicious. And we trademarked that, which a lot of businesses don't see value in at the start, but I see a lot of value in trademarking to protect your own business, and it's really easy. We then had to find the markets, who would buy it, and all of this had to be explored before we put any staff on. So at first I'm working out of the kitchen, and then when we worked out that we had outlets, we could find people who would put it in their greengrocers and in their delis. then we knew that we could go ahead and go into production. So then I hired some staff because I was helping run farm business. I knew I couldn't do it myself. And my time was more valuable doing the profit and loss than it was cooking strawberries. You go into business to make a profit. Otherwise, you really just have a hobby. Probably the bigger challenge I had was with the Airbnb business. The hotel amenities is the term that's used for the little shampoos and things that are left. And that was more challenging in that no one had done it before. And to do a private label, it was about privately labeling each of the hosts. So the people who are renting out their home, they were my customers. I saw that they would buy from me the shampoos and conditioners with their own name on it, or with the name of their property on it, or with a picture of themselves. They could even, I set it up that they could even put a picture of their guests on the shampoos. So when the guests arrive, it was a real wow factor. That seemed like a good idea. And everybody told me it's a great idea, but it was just too hard to reach the hosts. I did keep going with the idea because I then identified that there were other businesses starting up to the Airbnb, you know, the new economy that had started around that, where people were offering cleaning services, concierge, luggage storage, transfers. There's a whole lot of businesses that were growing up around this economy, and they had nowhere to promote themselves either. So like me, they couldn't reach their hosts. So my next idea was national expos for Airbnb businesses that provide into there. And I set up expos in, my first one was to be in Melbourne, then Sydney, Gold Coast and Perth. I had a lot of planning. It took me 12 months to plan how to do that. And I'd had experience in international trade shows by that stage. I knew the requirements and a bit of how they work. It came time to, I had 36 exhibitors. I rang every one of them and said it's not going ahead because I couldn't guarantee them an audience. So I made a very hard decision, but it was the right decision. And that's what we talk about, cutting our losses. I knew how much I could spend on that venture and the time I needed to get it going. And I'd reached that point and I just had to make that decision. And I stuck by my decision. That was hard. It was hard because, yeah, it is a good idea. And even now people hear the idea and they say, wow, that's really great. But there's a phrase that I often quote to businesses. It says, there might be a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap? So I saw that no one was doing the labelled shampoos, no one was doing expos, and that's the gap in the market that we talk about. So, you know, and I researched it. Google is your best friend when you're doing this sort of thing. I researched everything out of it and I found that no one else was doing that. So yes, that seemed like a gap in the market of people supplying to their nice things to their guests when they arrive. That's what the market would be defined as. But because I couldn't have made any money out of it, it means that there wasn't a market in that gap. You don't have to always come up with the brand new idea and be the first of anything. You can have an idea that is existing, but you've got something particular that you can offer that's different to the others. Again, going back to the point of being in business is to make revenue and to make a profit. Otherwise, you have a hobby. So if you find that you make flourless carrot cakes really well, there's a lot of people who make flourless carrot cakes. What is going to make someone buy your particular carrot cake? That's what they call the unique selling point. or the point of difference. That is what a customer makes them want to buy your particular one rather than the flourless carrot cake down the road. When I see a business who wants to start up, I first of all ask them, how do they want to get out of that business eventually? And that might be, my turn of phrase for this is, dying is a perfectly acceptable answer. If you want to build a business that you have for the rest of your life and pass on to your children, that's fine. If you build a business that you want to sell in 5 years' time and make that your profit, then that's fine too. But making that decision or having an idea around that from the start can be really important. And then you have to work out, what do you want out of that business? Do you want to live on $1 million yacht in 30 years' time? Do you want to just build up something so that your children can then have a business for them to carry on? And then it comes down to working out some numbers. If you want that $1 million yacht, how much do you have to make in profit each year? So not sales, it's the bit that you get to keep after tax and everything. How much do you want to have in profit each year so that you can live on $1 million yacht in 30 years' time? And then you have to work out how many flourless carrot cakes you have to sell each year to make that same amount of profit. So it comes down to numbers. And then you work out how many carrot cakes you have to make a month, and then how many a week, and how many a day. Now, if those numbers come out to being, you have to sell 1,000 carrot cakes a day to live on $1 million yacht, you've really got to look hard at that. You're not going to sell. No one, as a startup, can realistically sell 1,000 carrot cakes a day. So that's the process, the thinking that you go through to work out where you want to be, how you're going to get there, and what you have to do. So essentially that equation is a business plan. Each individual as an entrepreneur really has to look at themselves and say, what skills do I have? I may be a great carpenter, but can I do ledgers? Can I do bookkeeping? And do I want to do the administration? Can I go out and get more business for myself? Can I sell myself? And this is where I identified with the expos that I know personally, I have difficulty, believe it or not, asking for money. I can build relationships, but I don't have sales skills. And so I knew when I was starting the expo business that I had to have someone who could get on a phone and ask somebody for $300 per square foot to put up an expo stand, and to convince them of how that will benefit them by giving me some money. And I knew I couldn't do that. So my very first thing was to employ someone to sell for me. There's a lot that you can do on your own. There's a lot of setting up that is free, that is low cost, and you don't need to pay a solicitor or an accountant to do. And there's a lot of resources, particularly from the government now. Business.gov.au has a lot of resources, and that's the Australian government. And setting up a business, there's a lot of resources there, and there's a lot you can do on your own to set up the business, which is different to starting up the business. So setting it up is getting your business name, deciding what that name will be, finding an accountant, not necessarily engaging them yet, but finding one knowing who you would choose as a solicitor, they are two important things. Knowing what insurances you will need, knowing what permits you will need. There's all 3 levels of regulation that you have to be aware of, and you may have no touch points with all 3 as regards regulations go, but you will undoubtedly have some sort of permit or licensing that you will have to find out about for yourself. So all of that research you can do yourself, and that's setting up the business. You have to value your time. You have to put a dollar value on your time. Now, is your time better spent going out and finding people who will resell your carrot cakes than you mixing the batter? And that's where you need a team. If someone is better out finding who will sell your, if you have a salesperson, like me, if you don't have those skills and you need to employ someone, you better make sure that you can mix enough batter to make your time as valuable as that. So building a team is really important, and that's where, as you grow, as you get more people buying your carrot cakes, you will need to grow that team, because there's only so many hours in a day and only so many carrot cakes you can mix in a day. As long as the cost of that is built into what you're selling them for and you still have a profit on the top. Plan, research. I have a lot of people who come to me for business advice, and I ask them, who are your competitors? And I say, there's no competitors out there. And the first thing I do is I go on Google and I find there's competitors everywhere. And then plan all these thoughts that you have about what you want to do. Be realistic with yourself and say, can I really make 1,000 carrot cakes a day? The other is ask for help. I had another business venture where we had a general manager who seemed to be running it really well, but he made a mistake and he didn't ask for help. And we lost that business and we lost a lot of money. The worst thing you can do is not ask for help.